Well, thank you for those rousing applause here. And I'm sorry, again, we are trapped in this chemistry laboratory here today, but I think that gifted programs can happen anywhere. And this is kind of what I'm trying to enlighten to you, is that giftedness is not just something that happens to rich white kids. And so we need to serve everybody. And to best do that, it's going to require your understanding and your getting a better perspective of how we go about the identification process and what we can do to work as a team to make sure that we are reaching every student who needs our help. All right, so today what I plan to do is get us a little bit of information about the history of gifted education in America. And then we are going to see some hands-on activities that will try and incorporate what we learn from today's presentation. So here we go. I am currently enrolled in Shenandoah University. I am trying to pursue a gifted endorsement. And so part of this is this presentation to you to try and make your awareness grow as we go through this. Okay, so two little facts to try and give you the idea that this is something important that we need to address is the fact that we are underrepresenting many of our minorities in our gifted programs. And so what you will see here nationally, it is estimated that about 6% of students are currently being identified as gifted with all of our tactics that we use to do this. However, inside of that, there is somewhere in the neighborhood of up to 50% of students that are being overlooked, either through budgetary, racial discrimination, or just misidentification because of behavioral issues. Specifically, we can see that almost 60 to 70% of Blacks are underobserved for being gifted. Latinos are somewhere over the 50% mark. So there is some deficiencies that we could address here. So today what we're going to do, again, give you a little bit of background, give you some behind the scenes of how kids are identified. Then it's going to be your turn. You're going to try and do your best to identify some giftedness and make some decisions on who gets included into the CGS program. All right, so what you will see here is the start of our story in France. Galton, he is the first to do some selective examination of mental superiority, and that's where the root of some of our issues starts, way back in the 1860s. In America, 1904 is where we first started getting testing for the cognitive awareness, cognitive abilities of some of our gifted students. It wasn't until 1916 that we started to adapt an IQ test that standardized all of this information. Terman in the 1925s, he comes up with some research that gives us the basis for giftedness, some standards so that we can start observing some of their characteristics. But it wasn't until Hollingsworth in the 1940s that we started focusing in on where do these gifted students go? How do they adapt in society? It wasn't until after we had some of our moonshot programs that we started making a concerted national effort to standardize what we were going to talk about as gifted. That happens with Marlin in 1971, still in existence today. It wasn't until the 80s that we started then thinking about, well, should we only use the IQ test to identify the giftedness? Are there other possibilities out there? And so that's wherever we had our Clark in 1988 that includes, well, creative behaviors. That is actually a representation of giftedness. Sternberg in 88 then says, well, maybe we should worry about experimentation and adaptations as being parts of what it is. So then Gardner, along those same lines, says, let's put them all together into one theory and say that there are multiple intelligences. And so we have multiple ways that we could display our giftedness. Smutny in 2003 advocates, now, since we have all these different ways, let's not rely solely on IQ. Let's start thinking about portfolios and interviews and observations so that we can get people identified on a more broad spectrum. Abu, again, backs this up, validates the studies. And so now, where we stand today, Marlin is again part of a national standardization in 1971. Identifying students is still based on this definition, saying that students demonstrate high performance in intellectual ability, academic content, creative thinking, leadership, and physical ability. Once we identify these kids, we must provide services to them. It's just like special education, only it's the kids who need enrichment. And so, there is many states that will adapt this and include other aspects of it now, because we're examining students on a broader spectrum, including creativity, artistic, leaderships, creative thinking. So why must we do this? Most importantly is because it helps society. If we can get our best and our brightest to be challenged, they are going to move further, and they're going to help the rest of society once they become adults. It needs to be done early so that we can not lose them to the system, so that they will be, again, contributing earlier and developing earlier. So how does this process work? Typically today, it works through a screening process and through referrals. Once this is happening, then we must seek the permission of the parents to test them. We offer a test, and then we get a committee together to interpret those results. Well, what are the tests that we offer to them? There's generally one of many, but these are 4 of the more popular ones, and ones that we will use here in Spotsylvania. The Wisconsin 4, the COGAT, and the Wisconsin Woodcock-Johnson and Kaufman tests are all different focuses depending on what we want to see in our results. What do we want to measure? And so with the Wisconsin 4, what we're talking about is vocab, general, arithmetic, problem solving. Those are traditionals. But then we can go over to some of the Kaufman ideas, and it could go into pictorial analogies. And so we have some abstract thinking concepts that could be identified where the Wisconsin might miss it. So one of the issues with this process, though, that we are finding is that we are missing students. Obviously, with our 50% in some of these subpopulations, we need to fix this. So some of the issues that develop out of this is that we just don't have the funding for it, or they're misappropriated fundings. That the parents are not always in support of the educational process. There may actually be some systemic discriminatory practices, and of course language, if they are coming from other countries and haven't yet acclimated to America. Some of the remedies for this is that we again utilize multiple criteria for us identifying them, reestablishing norms and ranks, how we go about trying to identify these students and placing them into the programs. Not just relying solely on one test, opening up the portfolios and observations, recommendations. And then finally, you guys getting your training so that you can start to recognize some of these characteristics. So whenever we identify them, it requires that we have evidence. And so curriculum that provides opportunities for creative behavior, collaborative gifted and classroom teacher lessons. We want to bring you guys together, not only the gifted teacher, but as well as the classroom teachers, bringing them together so that they are starting to develop evidence and that will help enhance these students, enrich what they are learning. So getting you together is really important, having designated time for this, and then making the time for the observation so that we are properly identifying that these kids are getting their services. We're providing the services. So what we can do is remedy some of these issues. Many a times classroom teachers say that there is perception of arrogance in the gifted students, that they feel they're better, that we have differing definitions of what is gifted. We need to standardize that we're just causing disruptions in class, and that this is actually taking away time from the low-end students. So we got to try and fix those. How are we going to do that? Again, over here on the right side, you'll see implementing the enrichment. So making certain that we are not only providing the baseline information content to students, but we're also asking the other students to go a step beyond. Improving the definitions, which is what we're trying to do today, so that you guys are aware of how this is more open, transparent process. Changing culture, making certain that the students and the staff know that we're just different, that we are not necessarily better than any other student, and making certain that they have that exact same attitude. And then making certain, most important, that we have designated time between the classroom teachers to hear their ideas and their concerns so that we can validate them and work on getting them together. Once we've done this, we're going to get together our data and make certain that it's reliable. So we're going to use a committee formula. It's not just going to be one person. There's going to be rubrics that will be established, and then we will come up with a ranking, and then we will grade them and try and see if we can incorporate them into the program. So now it is your turn. So I've got 3 different game activities that we're going to do. First off, what we're going to do is give you 2 minutes. You and your team open up your folders for breakout session number 1. You're going to get 2 minutes, and you are going to read through the following student information sheets. And unfortunately, because of limited resources, only one of these students is going to be able to be identified as gifted. They may all be identified, but who is the most, so the instructions on this one, sorry, that's for the third one. We are looking through this, and there can be one that's going to be selected as gifted. So we're going to have to decide who is going to be the gifted out of these. Only one of these can meet your criteria, and you guys get to come up with the criteria. What do you think is most important? How are you going to rank them? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Session number 2. What we're going to do on the session number 2 is you are going to now use a ranking of what do you think is the most beneficial of the teacher, gifted teacher, classroom teacher techniques. Which one of these do you think is going to help us most serve these gifted students and to break down some of the barriers, some of the walls to incorporating enrichment activities or to incorporating some of these gifted techniques? So you're going to cut out these little strips here. You're going to lay them out. You and your team decide, ranking them. And there is no order to the giftedness letters at the top. That's not in part of it. You are just deciding which is the best. And then for our third breakout session, what we're going to do is similar to the first, but now these are the ones that are getting into the CGS program. So we have 3 students that you get to choose from. And you're going to look at their results from testing and observations and recommendations, and you see where their fit is, and you have to make the choice as to who is getting into the program. All right. I hope that I've made a case for you today that it is imperative that we accommodate these students. There is something that we have been missing, and we need to open our eyes up to it, and that we can do it if we cooperate. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that you have enjoyed your exploration into gifted education for today. Get out there and enrich those kids. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.